Welcome back, Peter.
Good to be back. Good to be back.
Good to be back.
But good to be back.
Yeah. And it's episode number 35, I believe. And this time we're doing a book called The Practice by Seth Godin. Yeah, we're going to do the book summary as usual and then get into it. Right, so The Practice by Seth Godin is a book about shipping creative work. It argues that creativity is not something you're born with, but rather it's something that comes from having a consistent, disciplined practice, with a focus on generously shipping the work rather than keeping it to oneself. Elements of a healthy practice include trusting yourself, embracing constraints, creating for someone rather than everyone, and contributing rather than competing, all while accepting that certainty is a trap, creativity is a choice, and the outcome is merely a byproduct of the practice, that is, in itself, the reward. And then, in conclusion, as Seth says, the magic of the creative process is that there is no magic. What are your initial thoughts or any things you want to add there, Peter?
No, nothing to add. We'll speak about it and touch on it. But yeah, it's a practice, and I think most of what I was getting from it is about, having, it says about shipping the work, which requires you to start. I think in most cases,
Yeah.
doubt ourselves and to the point where we don't even start. But the biggest thing that we need to do is to actually start, and the rest follows. And it also talks about how so often we focus on outcomes, yet that's not what's important. It's rather the process. You get those outcomes because you've gone through the process. But anyways, we'll, I think, dive in deeper as we go through the book.
Sounds good. So we're going to go through the usual flow that we go through, where we'll go through the I don't really know what to call these, either parts or chapters, but they basically, the way that the book is written is there's, I think we said 6 or so. No, there's a little bit more than 6. But there's a handful of these sections, and they in the book they've got a lot of subheadings and things like that. But I'm gonna skip past those, and I'm basically just gonna read little snippets as usual throughout the whole, let's call them part, and then we'll chat about it. But some of them are quite long, so we'll be jumping through a bunch of things, and then we'll chat. All right. Should we kick it off, Peter?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Okay, so the first part is called Trust Yourself, and we will start on page 3. So it says here, shipping because it doesn't count if you don't share it. Creative. Oh, sorry. Just a little note is that I think we might have said it, but the book is called The Practice, but the subtitle is called Shipping Creative Work. So, yeah. So it says, shipping because it doesn't count if you don't share it. Creative because you're not a cog in a system. You're a creator, a problem solver, a generous leader who is making things better by producing a new way forward. And work because it's not a hobby. You might not get paid for it, not today, but you approach it as a professional. And then a bit further down, creativity is a choice, not a bolt of lightning from somewhere else. And then the practice is not a means to the output. The practice is the output, because the practice is all we can control. The practice demands that we approach our process with commitment. Creativity is not an event, it's simply what we do, whether or not we're in the mood. Then on the next page, sculptor Elizabeth King said it beautifully. Process saves us from the poverty of our intentions. And then Seth says, learn to juggle, draw an owl, make things better, without regard for whether it's going to work this time. The practice will take you where you seek to go better than any path you can follow. Then jumping to page 7. The industrial system we all live in is outcome-based. It's about guaranteed productivity in exchange for soul-numbing, pre-directed labor. But if we choose to look for it, there's a different journey available to us. This is the path followed by those who seek change, who want to make things better. It's a path defined by resilience and generosity. Creativity doesn't repeat itself. It can't, but the creative journey still follows a pattern. It's a practice of selflessness and ego in an endless dance. Then to page 8. The Bhagavad Gita says it's better to follow your own path, however imperfectly, than to follow someone else's perfectly. But further down, at the heart of the creative practice is trust, the difficult journey to trust in yourself. And then on page 11, we can adopt a practice. Here are the surprising truths that have been hidden by our desire for those perfect outcomes. And then he gives a few, but I'll just read 1 or 2 of them. A good process can lead to good outcomes, but it doesn't guarantee them. Attitudes are skills. There's no such thing as writer's block. Creativity is an act of leadership. We become creative when we ship the work. Good taste is a skill. Passion is a choice. Then on to page 16. This is art, the act of doing something that might not work simply because it's a generous thing to do. Art is the work we do where there is no right answer. We make art with a keyboard, with a paintbrush, or with our actions. To the next page. It's art if you let it be, if you care enough. You were born ready to make art. You were born ready to make art, but you've been brainwashed into believing that you can't trust yourself enough to do so. Then on the next page, creativity is an action, not a feeling. I'm going to butcher this name, but Marie Schkerkut points out, we can't always do much about how we feel, but we can always control our actions. On the other hand, committing to an action can change how we feel. If we act as though we trust the process and do the work, then feelings will follow. Waiting for a feeling is a luxury that we don't have time for. Then to page 20. Flow is a symptom. If we condition ourselves to work without flow, it's more likely to arrive. We do the work, whether we feel like it or not, and then, without warning, flow can arise. Flow is a symptom of the work we're doing, not the cause of it. Then to 21. Once you decide to trust yourself, you will have found your passion. You're not born with it, and you don't have just one passion. Our passion is simply the work we've trusted ourselves to do. The trap is this. Only after we do the difficult work does it become our calling. Only after we trust the process does it become our passion. Do what you love is for amateurs. Love what you do is the mantra for professionals. Then to 29. Imposter syndrome is real. It's a sign that you're healthy and that you're doing important work. It means that you're trusting the process and doing it with generosity. Then to 31. The truth is, we've been fooled into believing that roles like writer, leader, and artists are birthrights, fixed in place, something we either are or we aren't. Leaders are given talents or privileges, not choices. The truth is simpler. If you want to be a leader, then lead. If you want to be a writer, then write. And then 34. If you do something creative each day, now you're a creative person. Acting as if is how we acquire an identity. And then lastly, on page 40, the practice requires a commitment to a series of steps, not a miracle. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, there's, we've gone through quite a lot, but just to echo something you said, and I think when I was reading, I was like, that's quite interesting, was the whole section of loving what we do. I think it spoke about passion. So often we are led to think, oh, everyone's like, I haven't found my passion yet, and etc., etc. But you're not going to find your passion if you haven't tried something and found something that you resonate to, So yeah, I think that was just quite interesting for me to read that, to be like, yeah, most people look at it the other way around. And I have a feeling we read a book that also spoke about people finding their passion. I've forgotten how it was described them, but yeah, that for me was quite interesting. And I think another point is, I think we have mentioned, or I mentioned it in the beginning, that when you read this section or chapter, it's more about taking action. You just starting. I think so often, and I think, was it 4,000 Weeks or Atomic Habits where we read, and that has also stuck to me, that we procrastinate not because we're struggling with something, but rather we are afraid of the critique that comes after we've shipped off our work.
Yeah.
And this section essentially is about, section 11 or part 11 was like, creativity is an action, not a feeling. It's like you're not going to feel something for you to become creative. You have to create something, and I think some would even say, like, what you create is what causes people to feel, and you don't create things that appeal to everyone. What you create can only appeal to certain people. So the feeling is actually after the thing is done.
Yeah.
Before you've created it. So yeah. Even like the illustration of how to draw now, that was also one way of looking at it. It's like, you see it as a bunch of ovals, but then you then fill in the details. You have to start somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the whole trust yourself idea, I think, is helpful, because we often, like you were saying, we often tend to think, okay, I'll do it when the perfect moment arises, or any of those kinds of thoughts. But actually, Seth and many people that we've read before, I think the person that you were thinking of, or the book that you were thinking of, is one of the ones by Cal Newport, where he talks about passion and just the idea of the fact that you find your passion by doing things. You don't just and it's the act of doing the things that almost stirs up more passion, not the other way around, where we tend to think of it as the other way around. So pretty much like what you said earlier. And I think just that act of taking the next step and continuing to take little steps forward is one of the most important parts of the whole idea of the practice, because that's what, as he often refers to in the book, that's what the professional does. The professional doesn't say, oh, okay, I don't feel like working today, and therefore I'm not going to show up. So the professional says, okay, I don't feel like working today, but I'm still going to do my best, and I'm still going to give it my all to try and make it a solid work day and get stuff done. And sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's better than you expected, sometimes worse. But you keep showing up again and again. And yeah, I think with general creative work, we don't do that enough, and we tend to want to wait for the perfect moment instead of just committing to a series of steps, as he puts it. Yeah.
I mean, even just before we move on, like that last line of the practice requires a commitment to a series of steps, not a miracle. You know, it's like so often like the reason like people want a short way through, you know, they don't trust the process. And I mean, in this, it's like, no. And again, like I said in the beginning, it's like when we speak about wanting to do something, no one ever speaks about what is required to do that thing, but it's more of the outcome. You know, it's like, let's say people that, I know this is a random example, but want to pursue a career in something, they usually it will be, I want to do this because I want to live a comfortable life. You know, but it's like, but you're forgetting that in between where you are now and to have that comfortable life, you actually have to go through, you know, the process of acquiring, let's say, that qualification, getting a job, and how many years up until you get there. But, and again, that is what the practice is. It's like you have to commit and start something, you know.
Yeah.
So often we're blinded about the outcome, but what we actually need to enjoy is what we do in between then and having that comfortable life, you know. So it just doesn't, you just don't end up say, oh, I want to be this. Therefore, when you commit to that, you're successful. No, you have to go through the process.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, the owl illustration is one that kind of touches on it. But sometimes the work itself isn't always super clear, and we don't have as much information as we want, and so it's for a bunch of reasons, including that we end up saying like, okay, no, I'm not gonna do it because I'm not sure, and whether it's studying or whether it's pursuing some creative process, it's easier to just say like, I'm not certain that this will work out, and so let me rather not do it. But if we just keep on trying, and like you said earlier, if we just start, then we keep on improving and keep on improving. Eventually, the ovals from the owl become the owl. But it's quite a difficult thing to get to be able to draw the owl well. But we've got to keep practicing and trying, and eventually we'll figure things out. But there's almost never, when it comes to creative processes, there's almost never just an answer book given to you that you follow step by step and then there's the result. And that makes it difficult. But that's why you have to trust yourself to just go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, should we move on to the next one?
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Okay, so the next part is called generous. And yeah, going to read through the snippets again, then we can chat through it. Starting on page 45. The system says, please sign up for the status-driven recipe of insufficiency, compliance, and applause. Then to the next page. Industrialists seek to make what's requested and do it ever cheaper and faster. But people who have found their voice are able to help us see that life includes more than what was requested. You're not a short order cook. You're here to lead us. And then on the next page, a scarcity mindset simply creates more scarcity because you're isolating yourself from the circle of people who can cheer you on and challenge you to produce more. We can choose to realize that creativity is contagious. If you and I are exchanging our best work gets better, abundance multiplies, scarcity subtracts. A vibrant culture creates more than it takes. And then jumping to page 54. If enough peculiar people get together, something new is going to happen. Author Scott Page has shown that as systems get more complex, diversity creates ever more benefits. Then to page 58. The writer Justine Musk reminds us that in order to say no with consistency and generosity, we need to have something to say yes to. Our commitment to the practice is the source of that yes. The world expects that its requests will be accepted. Responding or reacting to incoming asks becomes the narration of your days instead of the generous work of making your own contribution. And a bit further down, it's difficult to find what author Rosalind Dischavo I'm terrible with these names, calls the deep yes. And then to page 62. Kaisu is the Hokkien word for the fear of being left behind or not getting enough. We've amplified a feeling of scarcity to encourage people to comply, to get them to buy more stuff before it's all gone, to work even harder because someone's going to overtake you, and to live in fear. If you're using outcomes that are out of your control as fuel for your work, it's inevitable that you will burn out, because it's not a fuel you can replenish, and it's not a fuel that burns without residue. And then to page 64. Stephen Pressfield's masterful The War of Art taught us to see the force he calls resistance. Resistance is an elusive and wieldy force, an emotion that will conspire to block us, undermine us, or, at the very least, stall us in the pursuit of work that matters. Resistance relentlessly pushes us to seek confidence. But if we don't need confidence, if we can merely trust the practice and engage in the process of creation and shipping, then resistance loses much of its power. Generosity is the most direct way to find the practice. Generosity subverts resistance by focusing the work on someone else. And then to page 69. Practical empathy. People don't know, we have to be able to say, it's not for you, and mean it. The work exists to serve someone, to change someone, to make something better. In order to be popular, to reach the masses, we have to sacrifice the very change we sought to make. Change someone, and, as Hugh MacLeod said, ignore everyone. And then page 73. It's honorable for your art to be just for you, for you to choose to create for an audience of one. But that's not professional work, because you're not on the hook. There's no one to serve you and the idea in your head. There's no one to serve but you and the idea in your head. The other route is to become a working professional, a leader, someone who chooses to ship creative work, and shipping means that it's for someone. To commit to the path is is a brave and dangerous act. And then jumping to 88. Our job is to be generous as we know how to be with our work. Here's a simple clue. How often do you recommend a competitor? The ability to eagerly suggest an alternative to your work is a sign that your posture is one of generosity, not grasping. Then on the next page, also, the feeling of being owed will destroy our ability to do generous work. Working in anticipation of what we'll get in return takes us out of the world of self-trust and back into the never-ending search for reassurance and the perfect outcome. That is all the notes that I have for this section. What are your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, I think with this, I think as it's sort of, or how I view it, my view for this section is it's a step up from, like you said, trusting yourself and starting. With this, it's more of having the ability to sort of give what you have, if that makes sense. So it's like being able to share your abilities, not keeping them to yourself. It talks about how, I think it was like the one about someone saved TV, on how during that time people made TV that people wanted to watch, but not things that were crowd pleasers, because as much as the cheat to doing that would have been put in, they made reference to The Office, that was a crowd pleaser, but there was, those shows that people that appealed to certain individuals, and those are the ones that actually carried, those sectors a long way, so like the whole I think it was the generosity of the pennies, of how, just, it was pretty much, I think they said, a game where people had to find a penny or something, and like the satisfaction that people got to sick in that penny was what made it excited to get there. So it's like it's more of the sharing aspect again, and I think the last line in that section says, you produce more than you know if your intent on doing is for someone else. When you're doing something for someone else, you realize that you end up doing more. What else can I think of? Even the whole resistance is real. I think you did cover that section. And like the fear of falling behind, you don't have to use that as fuel, you just have to sort of put yourself out there and at your pace to accomplish what it is that you want to accomplish. There's a lot of God nuggets. I think another one was page 56 for me about it says, the title there is Here I Made This, and in reading that, it was more speaking to when someone say, here I made this, it goes a long way than something, let's say, you bought for them. Knowing that someone put the time to actually create that thing for you goes a long way. And again, even the diversity of problem solving, that first line there is like that what makes them problems. A problem without a solution isn't a problem, it's simply a situation. Problems have solutions, and people have to solve those problems. And you have to leap up and solve So the problem, it takes you identifying and stepping forward and be like, I will solve this problem. So, yeah, again, it was one of the longest sections, and that was my take to it, on how, yes, it was tied with generosity, but it was more about our willingness to actually, from trusting ourselves that we can do stuff, but then the next step is you being willing and knowing that you're doing things for others, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I think the generosity idea, I think it ties nicely into the resistance part. So I mean, we obviously did a read through of the War of Art, and I that idea of resistance, and that it's a continuous thing that you have to fight against. But I like Seth's framing here, where he says essentially that one of the ways because resistance pushes back against us in all kinds of ways. With greed and with us wanting to achieve things, and basically just feeling like we're not able to, and all of these different things. And Seth's basically saying, well, one of the things that really dampens resistance's power is to just be generous, because it shifts the focus from us to someone else. And I think that's really helpful, because often we want to either, from like doing creative work, we either want to be making a ton of money, or we want to impress people with the incredible things that we've done. But if we don't focus on ourselves or focus on how it can benefit us, but rather just focus on the work itself, or focus on doing it for someone else as a generous act, it can go a long way into making the practice easier. But either way, whether the practice is difficult or not, you should keep on trying to continue with the practice, because even when it's difficult, if you continue on with it, that's another way of being generous, because you're producing things that other people can then enjoy effectively. So I mean, Seth, as an example, was a blog. He's been writing a blog for, I don't know if it's he probably has one of the most one of the blogs with the most posts on it, because he just, for I don't know how long, but it's been more than 10 years, I think. He's just been posting and posting every day. I think it's every day that he posts. He just posts something. The generous acts.
Yeah.
Right, should we go on to the next one? The professional.
Yeah.
So, starting on page 99. So yeah, this is the next part, the professional. And on page 99 it says here, if the problem can be solved, why worry? And if the problem can't be solved, then worrying will do no good. Worrying is the quest for a guarantee, all so we can find the confidence to press on. It's an endless search for a promise. The outcome will be worth the effort that we put into the process. The time we spend worrying is actually time that we're spending trying to control something that is out of our control. Time invested in something that is within our control is called work. Then going to page 102. We don't ship the work because we're creative. We're creative because we ship the work. Then 103. If you want to get in shape, it's not difficult. The difficult part is becoming the kind of person who goes to the gym every day. And then 108. Too often, the market pushes creators to give away their work, and too often we come to believe that giving it away, removing money from the interaction, is the most generous thing we can do. But that's not the case. Money supports our commitment to the practice. Then 109. Often the act of charging for the work creates a generous outcome because your work is to effect change, not to make ourselves invisible and free. Page 111. The masses aren't the point. They might be a welcome side effect of your work, but to please the masses, you must pander to the average, because mass means average. On average, every population is dull. The slide towards average sands off all the interesting edges, destroying energy, interest, and possibility. Better clients demand better work. Better clients want you to push the envelope. And then 114. Lousy clients don't want better work. They want a cheap commodity or something popular. And that is the snippets from The Professional. Some thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, let me just skip back. I think the opening was, you started there, and I think that's something that really is, and it took a while for me to sink in, where it says, if the problem can be solved, why worry, and if the problem can be solved, the worrying do you no good, it's how worrying actually robs us the ability to do things. When we worry so much, we end up being paralyzed, and we actually then don't do anything. And as that is like kind of shakes you away from your profession, if I may just use that lightly, and down there it says worrying is a way to hide from the fact that you're wavering on your practice. I think just as the book started, you just have to trust, the process. There are no shortcuts. Even I know you didn't go through this, but there was the bicycle problem. Even that for me was interesting, where it says, I'm having trouble learning how to ride a bike, and then the person was asked, how long have you been practicing, and then or how long have you practiced, and the person goes about 15 minutes. That on its own is like, what, you think it will take you 15 minutes? Like, there are no shortcuts. You have to see things through.
Things take time.
Things take time. And moving on. I think another thing that stood out to me was under the section on the hook or off. That last line where it says, we don't ship the work because we are creative. We are creative because we ship the work. Again, I think I said this in the beginning. It's like, if you're keeping something to yourself, you can't say you're creative. No one has ever said it. To the point where you probably have showcased it to the world. Are you then seen as a creative, And then, moving on. It's where's your hour? That was also one that stood out about how it pretty much talks about the discipline, and I think when I read that, I also looked at it as it's about priorities, because as much as people say they're busy, and I wouldn't say I'm passionate about this topic, but it's a conversation that I have quite often, in the sense that, let's say, friends, you're talking to someone or a friend, and they go weeks on end without communicating to you, and the excuse is they're busy. I don't know. To me, I just feel like it's taking 2 minutes to be like, "Hi, James, how are you? Hope you're doing well." It really doesn't take hours and hours there.
Yeah.
And I mean, that section went on to say that we are able to find times to eat, to bath, to do certain things, but we always then tell ourselves we can't find an hour to, let's say, go to gym or exercise. If it's really important enough, you will make that time, because trust me, there are hours of your day that you spend in doing things that are very relevant. So yeah, it's bringing professionalism into things that you do. Is quite interesting, and so that was sort of my take. From
I think
this section.
I think a lot of that is similar takeaways for me. The one additional thing that I'll add, which is part of what I read, is just that idea of not aiming for producing work for the masses. So this chapter says it, previous chapter said it as well in a different way, but basically choosing someone or some small group of people and do the things for that. There's I think it's a Y Combinator founder, I'm blanking on his name, but he wrote an article, and I think the title of the article is "Do Things That Don't Scale." And basically the point, as far as I understand, is like often we approach situations where we want to just scale to billions of users, for example. But that's a very different problem to the problem that you should be solving. The problem that you should first start off solving is just solving it for one person. For example, if you marketing and you're just starting a company, don't try and market to 1 billion people at once. Just go to one of your friends to start off with and speak to them, or go to, if it's a restaurant thing, go to the restaurant owner down the road and talk to them about it and say, well, are you interested in this thing? And of course that won't scale to 1 billion restaurant owners. Not that there are 1 billion restaurant owners, but you shouldn't do that, because that's going to stifle you in the beginning. And according to Seth, it's also just not the way that a professional would approach it, because I assume a professional would just know better. But the other side of it, which it's not directly from this book, it's I was actually watching a YouTube video by this guy who's a designer, and he was kind of making an argument for how basically the more users you get onto a platform, the more almost bland the platform becomes. Because let's say that you made an app for a small group of people, you can make features that those people absolutely love because you know those people well. But as you scale the app to more people, there's scaling problems and all kinds of stuff. But from this design point of view, what he was saying is that you actually have to make the app more simple and more bland, because you need to cater to more people, and those people are going to have diverse opinions and differences, and the only thing that you can really put in is the thing that everyone's happy with. You can't really have the feature that's like 10 extreme users are happy with. Like, okay, sure, you can hide it behind submenus and things like that, but then the app just gets more complicated and weird. So it's like, there are obviously ways around it. There's lots of apps that just work and serve millions of people, but yeah, it's just an interesting problem to run into, that we often want to do massive scale from the get-go, but we shouldn't do that. It's way better, and it's way better to just approach it to do something for a small handful of people, or even a specific person, especially to start off with.
Yeah, it's like know your audience. I mean, it's
Hmm.
funny enough when you're explaining that. It reminds me of the book we did probably 2 books ago, the collection of short stories, that software development company. You're really excited for us to read that book?
Rework.
Was it Rework? Yeah,
Yeah.
they do have a section exactly as you described, to be like they went for not making like a product on a global scale because they knew what they wanted and what worked best, and chose to stick to that instead of, like you say, and scale it out to many clients and then having many requests on what they need to add, meaning
Yeah.
that it will blown up the cost of developing that, but in the end actually hinder what the purpose of the application was.
Yeah. Saying that also, the rework thing made me remember I made a note on page 74 that there's an interesting point that kind of contradicts one of the points in rework, because in rework they talk about making something for ourselves first, but Seth's approach is different because he's saying make for someone else, and he's kind of saying if you make it for yourself, then it's good for you, but the more generous thing is to make it for someone else. And yeah, there's a few different like caveats there, but I think both approaches work in different ways. But I think Seth says later in the book something along the lines of, if you're making something for yourself and it works out, you are actually one of the lucky ones, that it just happens to work out like that. For most people, making something for yourself isn't the thing that's going to get you to the to be a successful creative. Again, not that you should really aim for that, it's a bit of a confusing thing, but rather doing it for someone else is the thing to do. And I actually don't know which approach is better, to be honest. I think both approaches work in different ways. Sometimes the problem is suited to you and making it for yourself makes sense. Sometimes it's a problem that's not your problem, but you know how to solve it. And so why not try it, even though it's not directly for you, it's for someone else. Yeah. All right. Should we go to the next section, intent?
Yeah.
Okay. So starting on page 119. If you care enough to make change, it helps to be clear about the change you seek to make, the intent. Signing your work and owning its impact are part of the generous act of being creative. Then to 121. We're not simply doing this work for ourselves, we're doing it to help someone else, to make change happen. And 123. But you can't reach everyone. However, you can choose who you'll reach. If you change those people in a remarkable way, they'll tell others. And so it begins. Who is it for? Once you choose which subgroup to tell your story to, which subgroup needs to change, this group becomes your focus. What do they believe? What do they want? What do they trust? What's their narrative? What will they tell their friends? The more concise and focused you are at this stage, the more likely it is that you're actually ready to make change happen. More and more specific, please, is the other title. And it says, and so the trap is in the generic, in the cloudy persona, the undetermined person, the vague generality. Your change is too important to be wasted on most people. Which people? Precisely which people? Voters, for example, is not specific. The Lane family in rural West Virginia, that is specific. And then to 126. Once you can put yourself on the hook to commit to who you are serving, you can find the empathy to make change, to make something for them. And now that you have a circle of believers, how can you bring the best version of the work to them? Instead of compromising your way to get to a set of mediocre elements, how can you use the smaller group to challenge you to go in another direction instead, towards better instead of more? And then 129. The process of shipping creative work demands that we truly hear and see the dreams and desires of those we seek to serve. Then 130. We've answered now who it's for. Now, what is it for? What is this element of our project for? Every element has a purpose. If you don't even know what it is, how will you do the work to achieve it? Again, it's easy to decide to avoid being clear about what it's for. If you announce what something is supposed to do, it's difficult to avoid the feeling of a failure when it doesn't do what you said it was going to do. And then jumping all the way to 150. The practice of intentional action has a few simple elements. 1. Determine who it's for and learn what they believe, what they fear, and what they want. 2. Be prepared to describe the change you seek to make, at least to yourself. 3. Care enough to commit to making that change. 4. Ship work that resonates with the people it's for. 5. Once you know whom it's for and what it's for, watch and learn to determine whether your intervention succeeded. And 6. Repeat. So yeah, what are your thoughts about intent, Peter?
Yeah, there was an interesting section. I know you didn't touch over it, but I mean, when I was going through the book, I was like, okay, this is quite interesting. It was like the simple example of a receptionist. You know, how, there's many ways in which, I mean, it kind of starts off to be like a receptionist is like, I don't want to say glorified, but like a pretty god, because you put them in place so that they open for people up and make sure people don't take anything, etc., etc. But then it went on to be like, in most cases, people that come to a particular office or a space with a receptionist are there to sort of do in some sort of business. They're either there to interview, they're there to buy something. And it talks about how the impression matters, and it's pretty much saying that receptionists can be placed intention or with the intent to sort of achieve a certain goal, so like, I mean, that pretty much is what this section is, to be like, for instance, like, who are you creating something for? You're narrowing down what you're doing something for. So, and I mean, that receptionist example for me was, quite interesting, and again, it was just about how even in intent, different people sort of view certain things as important. Not everyone, views things the same way. But yeah, what else can I say? Yeah, sorry if I'm all over the place, but
no.
Yeah, but yeah, the receptionist one really was one, and yeah, the whole you cannot reach everyone. I think that's also very important in things that we do. As much as I think naturally people want to reach everyone, but we have to be realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even 98, where it says intentional action is designed with purpose. What are you trying to change? What change are you trying to make, and how will you know if it worked? Those are things backed with intent. Only understanding those can really narrow down what it is that you deliver, or who what you're delivering for is intended for.
Yeah.
The one line on 121 is like, we seek to create change for people we serve. The most effective way to do that is to do it on purpose, you know.
Yeah.
And again, that also speaks to intent. You know, you have to be intentional about the things you do, and only then, you know, yeah, we'll be doing things with a purpose. Yeah, sorry, I skipped all over, but
No, it's all good. That's what this is for.
That I got from this section, you know. Yeah, I think another one, I don't know if you read this, under one of the section of who it's for, because I think this section had probably 3 or 4 sections subtitle of who it's for, but it talks about once you put yourself on the hook to commit to who you are serving, you can find the empathy to make something for them, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, if we don't choose who we're making something for, then it's a lot easier. Like, for example, scope creep. It's a lot if we don't have a specific person in mind who has specific issues that need to be solved, and you choose to solve them. I mean, as a software developer, as both of us are software developers, normally apps and things like that come to mind. So if you're not developing something for someone, you're going to end up in that generic case. And then it's easier to just keep on adding things and doing things and making extra things. And then you've spent, I don't know, a couple years on something, but actually no one really cares about it because it's just a mishmash of all kinds of random ideas. But if from the beginning you're intentional and you say, I'm building this for Peter. Peter has a podcast and he wants to do X or Y or Z, and I'm going to solve those problems. Then you solve the problems. And if Peter comes back to you, now I don't know if I'm talking about you or if I'm talking about an abstract Peter. I think both. But Peter comes back to you. Peter comes back to you and he's like, oh, I like this part, but I don't actually like this part. It's not useful to me. Then you know. Now you've learned feedback and you've gotten feedback and you can actually go and change things or update things. And you can make the decision to say, oh, okay, actually this app, I've decided to not design it for Peter because there's this other person, John, that is better suited to it. And I like what he wants and I want to build what he wants more. Or you say, okay, no, actually, I see what you're saying there, Peter. I missed the mark there. Let me rework it to make it better. And then you rebuild it, and then you go through that loop of saying, like, okay, is this what you want? And then eventually the customer's like, oh yeah, this is great. Or they're like, no, I actually don't find it useful at all. And then you've learned something, but you're no longer playing in some abstract idea space. You actually dealing with the real world. You're being intentional about who you're making something for. You're being intentional about what are you making. I'm going to make this thing, not I want to do everything that I could possibly do, because then you're going to do nothing.
No, like, it's funny you say that. I mean, even, I know this is a bit digressing a bit, but that's the same in, let's say, human relationships. You know, if you want to be intentional about things, you try out different things. You don't expect them to tell you everything. You know, you need to have room for that feedback, for someone to tell you, oh, I don't like this, or I like this, and only then would you know how you sort of, I don't want to say behave, but sort of what other people like, you know, like what, you know, like, oh, I definitely cannot invite James to ABCD because I know James doesn't like that, you know, but I can invite James to ABCD because you have once asked James, can you do this? He probably said yes out of politeness to come along, but I could clearly see he wasn't having a good time. Then I don't know, for next time, like, okay, James is not the first person I ask.
Yeah.
You know, and Yeah, and I think that goes into everything, even in the things that we do. Like you're saying, like if you're creating something, and if I'm the target, you won't know I'm the target up until you produce something, and I've given you a green light to be like, okay, I like what you've created here. So yeah.
Yeah, and the relationship thing is an interesting one as well, because it's one where you learn more about yourself. So in the same way as shipping something teaches you more about the actual thing and about you and what you are capable of and what you still have to learn and grow, in the same way a relationship does that, where marriage is a classic example.
Yeah.
If you're married to someone, you learn things both about that person and about yourself, because you're exposed in a different way. Like, someone is around you all the time, for better or for worse, and if you do something well, then they will be there to see that. If you do something badly, or you do something that frustrates the other person, they will be there and they will hopefully tell you in a constructive way, and you learn and grow from that. So yeah, but without shipping creative work, we can't get that kind of feedback. In the same way as if we live by ourselves, and there's nothing specifically wrong with living by oneself, but if one chooses to do that, one isn't going to learn as much about themselves as they would think, because obviously there's aspects that you learn when you by yourself, and that's good to do that as well, because then you can learn and grow and mature yourself. But sometimes there are certain things that you can only learn from being in a close relationship with another person. It's the same as family as well. Anyway, yeah. Should we go on to the next one?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so Peter, do you believe that there is no such thing as writer's block? That's the full title, even the so Peter part.
Yeah, I mean, just before we go, what was that one book where it says you can always say inspiration hits at 9 a.m. every single day type of thing?
Love that line. Yeah, it was from The War of Art. Yeah, he was like quoting someone about like, when do you write? And they're like, oh, I write when inspiration strikes. When does inspiration strike? At 9 a.m. every morning.
Every morning, yeah.
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 So yeah, no such thing as writer's block. Let me run through some of these things. This one's going to be another longish one.
Yeah.
So 155. The educational industrial complex has grown up around the idea that no one has the ability to create useful work without a certificate. There are certainly many places where a credential is essential, and I don't want a knee surgeon who learned the craft by watching YouTube videos. But often, credentialing is a form of signaling. It's a stalling device and a way to keep diversity down. Then going to 157, the desire for external approval and authority directly undermines your ability to trust yourself, because you've handed this trust over to an institution instead. Credentialing wouldn't have the power it does if we didn't eagerly embrace our lack of credentials as the perfect place to hide. Then 158, the truth is, if a reason doesn't stop everyone, it's an excuse, not an actual roadblock. Then actions matter more today than ever before. Take the opportunity that's available to engage in the long process of earning genuine expertise in service of making a change. Then 161. It's like writer's block. Writer's block is a myth. Writer's block is a choice. Writer's block is real, and yet it's all invented. It's a story. Stories are real, and stories can change. Then to the next page. If your story isn't working for you, you can find a better one to take its place. Then another heading, the search for certainty is at the heart of our roadblock. To be creative is to work on the frontier, to invent the next thing, the thing for which there isn't a playbook or a manual. Certainty, then, must be elusive, because we cannot know for sure. The elusiveness isn't a problem. It's not a bug. It's something to be illuminated. Elusiveness is not a problem. It's not a bug. It's not something to be eliminated. The uncertainty is the point. And then going to 164. Every creator who has engaged in the practice has a long, nearly infinite string of failures. All the ways not to start a novel, not to invent the light bulb, not to transform a relationship. Again and again, creative leaders fail. It is the foundation of our work. We fail and then we edit, and then we do it again. Then to 166. Writer's block is simply a side effect of our narrative. It's not an actual physical or organic ailment. It's simply a story we tell ourselves, one that leads to bad work habits and persistent fear. Then 171. When we stop worrying about whether we've done it perfectly, we can focus on the process instead. Saturday Night Live doesn't go on at 11:30 p.m. because it's ready. It goes on because it's 11:30. We don't ship because we're creative. We're creative because we ship. And then to 178. And he gives here a bonus 45 ways. There are at least 45 ways we sacrifice our work to our fear. And then I'm going to skip through only a few of them. Expand the project so it can't move forward. Sacrifice the work for commercial short term. Compromise on the good parts. Compromise on the hard parts. Don't go to work. Work all the time. Work only when inspiration strikes. Copy everything. Copy nothing. Expect applause. Don't set ship dates. Pretend you have writer's block. And then 182. Isaac Asimov published more than 400 books. How did he possibly pull that off? Asimov woke up every morning, sat in front of his manual typewriter, and he typed. He typed when he wasn't inspired. The typing turned into writing, and he became inspired. We don't write because we feel like it. We feel like it because we write. And then 195. What does good mean? It might be a trap to ask someone else or yourself if your work is any good. Was Harry Potter not good when it was rejected by 12 publishers? Did it suddenly become good after it became a worldwide phenomenon? Good needs to be defined before you begin. What it's for, and who it's for. If it achieves its mission, then it's good. And then lastly, 203. What is the difference between you and Gil Scott-Heron? He recorded more than 20 albums and revolutionized his art form. It's not that Gil's songs are better than yours, or that Hemingway's writing is better than yours. It's that they shipped their work, and you hesitated. Yeah. That is the points on there's no such thing as writer's block. What are your thoughts, Peter?
My thoughts on this was, the general idea that I sort of got from this was that we sort of our own enemies, and by that is like we stand in our own way, you know. I mean, there was a point where it talks about critics. Do we spend time? And I think it sort of relates to the point you're making about creating a product for everyone. It's like, do we spend time? I think what he said. Do you spend time reading 1-star reviews and improving the product for them when there's like a bunch of other people that like the product? Like there'll always be people that that don't like what you do, but doesn't take away from that thing being good. I mean, it goes up as what you read last is like about Harry Potter. What do you define as good? That differs from individuals. But yeah, on like page 166, they say our narrative informs our choices, our commitments, and most of all, our ability to make a difference in the culture. It's like talks about what we tell ourselves. So writer's block is again things we tell ourselves, the lies we tell ourselves.
Yeah,
that's what essentially creates what is coined as writer's block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the credentialing thing as well, where it's a story that we tell ourselves that if I'm not credentialed, then I can't do the work. And there's obviously a lot of good things that come along with the credentialing, because one, it helps us kind of gauge, okay, this person's put in some work and some effort and things like that. But it doesn't mean that if you aren't qualified to do something that you can't be really good at it, or that you can't do it at all. There's certain things where it's like, okay, I'm not going to let you be my knee surgeon, like he said, but a massive portion of things are actually, we basically have writer's block towards them. Like we could actually approach them. I mean, even writing is a reasonable example where it's like, often people think, okay, I need to have a literary degree before I can write. But actually, you can just start writing. And if you start writing, then you become a writer. And that's pretty much as straightforward as it is. If you write, you're a writer. If you don't write, you're not a writer, whether you have a degree or not in writing. Yeah. Writer's block is not real, I think is the conclusion.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Harry Potter being good or not part is, like you said, it's also, I think, a great point, because it's just like, yeah, Harry Potter was always good, but it just needed to get the right, I guess, initial audience to be able to spark it off, and then people can be like, yeah, it's actually really great, and then lots of people read it and enjoy it and that. But yeah, it's difficult then to judge, because I mean, as an example, if you wrote Harry Potter and you were rejected by 10 publishers, do you go to the 11th one and the 12th one and the 13th one? Or at some point you have to kind of be like, okay, no, like obviously this is not the thing. And it's difficult to judge and to gauge, should I continue or not? Because sometimes there are points where it's actually like, okay, you actually should just let that darling go and move on to a different project. But there's other times where it's like, okay, actually you just need to find the right audience and they will engage with the work and you'll realize that it's got value. Yeah. All right. Should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is a shortish one. Make assertions. So starting on page 209, it says here, in December 2014, French musician Joel Roussel discovered something of monumental interest to vegans everywhere. You can take water, the water that's left in the can of chickpeas, called aquafaba, and turn it into foam, and then use it for whipped cream and other concoctions. It wasn't in his kitchen when he wasn't in his. I wasn't in his kitchen when he figured this out, but I'm certain that before he was sure it was true, he asserted that it might be. Then to page 211. We've been pushed to have an answer, to know with certainty what's going to happen next, to be able to prove that we're right, to show our work. And answers in many settings are essential, but answers end a conversation, either because the answer is so clear that it solves the problem, or because it doesn't. Answers don't begin the inquiry. Assertions are the generous act of seeking to make things better. Before you find an answer, you'll need to make an assertion. And that's pretty much it for that chapter. Yeah, just make assertions and then try things out and see if they work out or not. If they don't, it's fine. If they do, maybe you've learned that you can make a vegan cream.
Cream.
Foam, yeah.
Yeah, no, this was also a very interesting chapter for me, as short as it was, especially the buzzer management, I think, sort of really painted a clear picture of what's needed there to be like, if you're at a game show, you don't have to wait for the quiz master to finish the question. You buzz based on what you've heard, and you've made an assertion of what he's going to say in the end, and then you think of the answer. And by the time he finishes reading, it's a game of chance. You hope that what you asserted and from your assertion, what your answer was, is in fact correct. So it's quite interesting to be like, even with a problem, before you really solve it, you sort of have an idea what the solution might be. You go through the process, to get to the outcome which is conclusive, essentially.
Yeah. And if we don't make those assertions, then we can't really learn anything. We have to, or not nothing, but you're not going to make new creative discoveries if you don't make assertions. You have to kind of just be like, I want to try this thing. And then maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
All right. Earn your skills. So that's the next one, starting on 219. In his breakthrough paper, The Mundanity of Excellence, researcher Daniel Chambliss found the perfect laboratory to test for what it means to level up. He reviewed the habits, backgrounds, and performances of competitive swimmers. Then on the next page, here are the facts that he discovered. There's no quantitative difference in training. People at higher levels of performance don't spend more hours training. There's no talent differentiation. The ability to swim fast is not something you're born with. In fact, there were two key differences between great competitors and good ones. 1. Skill. The best swimmers swim differently than the ones who don't swim as well. They do their strokes differently. They do their turns differently. These are learned and practiced skills. And 2, attitude. The best swimmers bring a different attitude to their training. They choose to find delight in the parts that other swimmers avoid. This is their practice. It turns out that it's not training hours or DNA that changes outcomes. It's our belief in the possibility and the support of the culture around us. Attitudes, of course, are skills, which is good news for all of us because it means if we care enough, we can learn. Then a bit further down, look for your cohort. These stories of amazing cultural the stories of amazing cultural institutions imply that something secret and magical was taught or experienced inside the hallowed buildings. But what probably actually happened was a cohort. And then 222. When you're surrounded by respected peers, it's more likely you'll do the work you set out to do. And if you're not, consider finding some. Find a cohort with intent. Don't wait for it to happen to you. You don't need to be picked. You can simply organize a cohort of fellow artists who will encourage themselves. And then lastly, jumping to 229. Domain knowledge. Did you do the readings? And I put reading in quotes there, just in my notes, because it's not actually specifically reading books only. It's just the idea of generally, did you get the domain knowledge? And so it carries on here and says, a first hurdle. Are you aware of what your reading must include? What's on the list? The more professional your field, the more likely it is that people know what's on the list. The reading isn't merely a book or a journal, of course. The reading is what we call it when you do the difficult work of learning to think with the best, to stay caught up, to understand. If you haven't done the reading, why expect to be treated as a professional? And then I put a note here. If you're not staying up to date with the latest information in your domain, why do you expect to be treated as a professional? So earn your skills. What do you think, Peter?
Sure, that insight that you had there kind of drives the nail home there,
Yeah.
To be like, you can't move with the times if you're not staying up with the times, essentially.
Yeah. It's sorry, go for it.
No, go for it.
No, it's just the professional thing is interesting because, like, if I just think about my own work, and if I want to get better at what I'm doing, and generally I do, then of course I have to stay up to date with things. I mean, like, AI is just one recent example of that, where it's like things are changing so fast and you have to try and keep up to date with it and learn what are the new technologies, what's happening, why is it happening, how can I make use of it. And if you want to get better at programming, to learn to get good at the programming language, to understand the nuances, to understand architecture and how do you build systems and what works and what doesn't work and when does it work, when doesn't it work, and to learn from other people, whether it's reading books or watching YouTube videos or whatever the case is. But to be a professional, I guess, and in quotes, be good at your job, you need to stay up to date with whatever is relevant in your field. If you're to use the knee surgeon example again, if you're getting a knee operation, you probably want the surgeon who is fairly up to date with the latest information on, like, what is good practices for knee surgery, what are dangerous things, what are things that we thought were good at one stage but has changed and now we actually realize, oh, it's not a good idea for this reason or that reason, or things that we thought were bad and actually it turns out that it's good and it makes a more successful surgery, or whatever the case is. You don't want to have someone who hasn't earned their skills.
No, I mean, and I think another part that that jumped out to me was how many years is too many. How it talks about how the one guy didn't want to reveal how long it had taken him to write a certain book, and then only to hear that other successful authors had taken just as long, not even longer, and again, that is like trust in the process. It takes time. Only through that will you actually end the skill, is what I got out of that.
Yeah, that was a good one, because I think that tied into the cohort idea.
Yes.
So one of the ways that you can earn your skills is by finding a group of people who are on that same path, and you can basically join their group or create your own group of those people. But so then this author, basically he ends up going into the library, or getting access to this library that there's a few other writers there that are famous, well-known writers, or at least famous and well-known to him. And he had been working on this book for 5 years and was kind of like a little bit distraught with, oh man, it's going to take forever. And then, like you said, they were like, no, they asked him, how long have you been working on it? And then he's like, 5 years. And then they're like, no, I worked on this thing for 7 years, and I worked on this thing for 9 years and stuff. So, and then he's like, oh, okay, it's actually fine. But if you don't have that, then it's difficult. And the same with the swimming thing, where if you swim with a group of just very average swimmers, chances are you're not gonna be a world-class swimmer. Not because you can't be a world-class swimmer, but because the cohort around you is not pushing you to perform at a higher level. Personally, I don't want to perform at an elite level. I'm very happy if it's a bunch of very average swimmers that are just trying to keep fit. But if you're wanting to push yourself and wanting to be the best, then you must surround yourself with people that are really good at what they do. There's that classic saying of, how does it go? Something along the lines of, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because then you're just not going to learn things. Should we go on to the next section?
Last section.
Okay, so the next one is seek out constraints. So starting on page 238. All creative work has constraints because all creativity is based on using existing constraints to find new solutions. REM was a solid indie band, but they had never had a breakout pop hit. With Peter not wanting to play electric guitar, they said, we started writing differently. The songs you write on the acoustic or the mandolin or the balalaika or what have you tend to be different than what you'd write on an electric guitar. We decided that we could write on different instruments rather than forcing ourselves to write different sounding songs. The discomfort caused created the energy that the band was looking for, and the record spent more than 2 years on the charts. Then going to page 242. Some of my favorite constraints, and then he lists them, and I'll read one or two. Time, money, team members, user trust, technology, and regulation. Constraints and your dance with them are part of the practice. Then to 244. In all this, the practice requires us to do our work without becoming attached to the outcome. When we trust ourselves, we're focused on the process, not the outcome. The process of doing our work and paying attention to the outcome without requiring it to happen. The process of preparation and revision. The process of caring enough to contribute. Then 245. Trusting yourself doesn't require delusional self-confidence. Trusting yourself has little to do with the outcome. Instead, we can learn to trust the process. This is at the heart of our practice. We can develop a point of view, learn to see clearly, and then ship our work, and ship it again and again. We don't do it to win, we do it to contribute, because as an act of generosity, not selfishness, we can do it for all the best reasons. The practice is its own reward. Then a bit further down, your work is never going to be good enough for everyone, but it's already good enough for someone. And then he lists some elements of the practice. Creativity is a choice. Avoid certainty. Results are a byproduct. Postpone gratification. Seek joy. Embrace generosity. Ship the work. Learn from what you ship. Avoid reassurance. Learn new skills. Get better clients. Repeat. And then lastly, on 253, he says, we have more to do. We need your contribution, but it can't happen and won't happen if we can't figure out how to trust ourselves enough to do the work. And then there's another closing section, but we'll read that in a bit. Seeking out constraints. What are your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, the contribution is needed, I guess. And yeah, I think to me, probably everything was sort of summed up with the favorite constraints. I think in everything we do, that's what sort of highlights. But again, at the same time, to me, my thought was, at what point does it go from a constraint to just being an excuse? Because sometimes, yes, it can be a constraint, but sometimes we might just slot it in there just because we want to. It goes back to that finding an hour, and the first constraint here was time. It's like, do we really not have the time, or is it just that, that's the easiest thing to say to sort of get ourselves out of committing to something,
Yeah. We almost always can find the time. But it's also like, I think, like you said, some of the favorite constraints are, it sums up the chapter well to say, okay, time, if we have a time constraint, like you need to finish by this time, or you only have so many hours to do this thing, that helps a lot with just getting it done. If you say you only have this much money, it constrains you to say like, okay, well then I can't buy this or pay for this thing. Like I can only choose from this set of things. And the one that I found interesting, because I don't normally like it as a constraint, is regulation. So like if you're developing software or things like that, and let's say the regulation is like, 14% tax, and then the next day it's 15% tax and stuff. And now you have to update your systems to cater for those things. So I find it kind of taxing. But thank you for the laugh. But it's an interesting one to put down as a favorite constraint for him, because it obviously gets him to think in certain ways. Maybe the tax one isn't a good example. Maybe there's other regulations that force you to sort of figure out how to approach something in a different way. But yeah. And then also another one that I enjoyed was the user trust one. Because often what happens is the user trust thing, we think, okay, like I'm building this thing, and you're just focusing on building the thing. But actually, you need to be in communication with the end user, and you need to figure out what do they want and what do they need and that. And that constraint is helpful because, like we said earlier, it helps you to focus on solving this problem for this person rather than doing a million different things. Yeah. And then one last one is the team member one. It's also a nice constraint because it starts to make you think like, okay, this is the team that I have, and maybe you can change the team, maybe you can't, but let's assume that you can't for whatever reason. How are you going to make that team work? Like, if you just have that team and that's the team that you have, how are you going to draw the best out of them and get them to be a great team, rather than being like, oh man, I wish I had more people, or oh, I wish I had less people because it's simpler to manage, or whatever the case is. All right. Any last thoughts there, Peter, before we do the closing section?
No, I think that's all from me. Yeah.
Okay. Then the last one is, I titled it Closing, but it's titled in the book Unquenchable. And it says here on 255, page 255, for a very long time, people have been telling you that you didn't have the right paperwork, weren't chosen, weren't good enough. And now, perhaps you see that it's all been up to you. In fact, it's up to each of us. The path forward is about curiosity, generosity, and connection. These are the three foundations of art. And then he ends on page 257. The magic is that there is no magic. Start where you are, don't stop. And that is the practice. What are your concluding thoughts, Peter?
You have everything you need to make magic. You always have. Go make it
Wow, you could have written that.
I could have, but no. I read it. I think from the start, just like I said, we pretty much our own enemies, and I mean, I probably have spoken about this before, and I mean, coming from a book, I've referenced it a few times about like procrastination, how we worry about the outcome, and I mean, in many words, this was about that, we don't want to do things, etc., etc. So, yeah, I think my concluding thoughts are just for us to be courageous enough to do what we want to do. Because the more we think of it, and we end up just getting paralyzed by our own thoughts and not end up doing anything, and nothing good comes from that, I guess.
Yeah. That's a good point. My concluding thoughts are that when I started reading the book, I thought we were going to get a clear thing of this is the practice, follow these steps. But actually, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding the book, but I don't think so. I don't think that there is a very clear and straightforward practice that he's giving. He's almost implying that the practice is something you figure out for yourself, but it has a whole bunch of these elements, like trusting yourself, like the resilience and just keeping going, and doing it for others, not for yourself. All of these different aspects, and it's interesting to see that, and it was kind of almost like a meta commentary on the book. I don't know if it was intentional, but the reading of the book and just going and taking steps slowly through kind of reveals that the practice is no specific practice. And that's a lot of how life is, where we want these clear things to just tell us, do this. This is exactly how you do things. But most of life is much more complicated and much less clear. And that's why we have to approach it and just sort of take the next step and try and figure things out and try and make assumptions and test them and just try and figure things out and ship that creative work so that we can see what actually happens, and then we can learn and refine our practice to be something that works well for us, whether that's getting up at 9 a.m. to write every morning because that's what you want your practice to be, or whether it's doing something completely different to that. But realizing that underneath all of that there's no actual magic in the creative process, and that's kind of the magic of it, is that you can just start doing stuff, and then you're doing stuff, right? And you're a writer, make an app and you're an app builder, whatever the case is. Yeah. Cool. Then I think that's it.
Yeah, thanks.
Until next time. Yeah, thanks, Peter. Okay. Cheers.